Hi, I'm Sarah. Welcome to my fourth year forum. My practice is mainly image-based and drawing. I sometimes work with more intentional or illustrative themes, but generally the image building pushes more towards an automatic approach. This alludes to the aesthetic of narrative without any explicit or conclusive concept. However, I do like to work with archetypal or personal symbols. I often use pattern, animals, monsters, mascots, and reoccurring characters. I started Newcastle in second year. In first year, I attended Salford University studying film production. I generally painted landscapes that were familiar to me and tried to capture a feeling of nostalgia and ghostliness that half inferred to the dilapidation within the area while also being suggestive of a more dystopian or apocalyptic landscape. I think at this point I was picking up from where I left off on my foundation year, where I made a series of paintings for the final exhibition that were inspired by the steel industry closing down. This is a single-screen cinema on Redcar Beach near where I live, which was a big part of my childhood. Unfortunately now it is closed due to damage caused by flooding. In the second semester of second year, I turned to a more automatic and meditative style of drawing. This involved working ink with immediacy instead of planning. Reoccurring characters and motifs began to set in at this time. The scenes varied, but a common connection was patterned jumpers and my animals, particularly my dog Megan. I became interested in how I could suspend this cast in visceral or tubulish forms. I was taking the module Vegetable Things at the time, and I really liked to hint towards anatomical imagery, perhaps lending to the idea that the scenes had a feeling of interiority or were being held by the body. I found that the language associated with gaming was really helpful for me navigating the space. For example, I like to use the word avatar to describe different parts of the self and how I choose to represent them. This is one of my paintings from second year. I'm quite interested in line work, so trying to make that work within acrylic painting was interesting. I found that I like to layer yellow over white so that I could get a really contrasted line. This is an earlier example of trying to layer illustrative work over abstract painting. In third year, I began making slightly more ambitious ink drawings that often had a mechanical quality. I kept producing more drawings or revisited old drawings to build them into paintings in mixed media. At this time, I was very interested in the carnivalesque. I also experimented with some more direct, intentional ideas. An example of this is these drawings related to the Dyatlov Pass incident. This was an event in the 60s where students on a hiking mission were found dead in such unpredictable ways that it caused mass speculation at the time. I liked the story because I was becoming interested in ambiguous narratives and loved the eeriness. But throughout the second half of the year, my work became looser, less resolved, and responded more to the lockdown. I really like goats, and they started to become a common motif in my work throughout third year. I feel like throughout uni, the research I did for inspiration that wasn't solely aesthetic often felt a little chaotic. The links between work and research were quite loose. This has sent me down rabbit holes on the collective conscience, symbolism, psychology, myth, spirituality, and interiority embedded in narratives. I settled on the idea that though there wasn't always explicit practical embodiment of these themes in my work, it did filter into the image building and help me understand how it might be seen by other people and where it fits into a wider context. In fourth year, I experimented a lot with landscape and pattern. I liked thinking about the connection between decoration, detail, and embellishment with metabolizing a drawing concept. My work began to depict more people and nature at this point. I continued to use animals, creatures, and mascots. I like to manipulate this cast into small domestic scenes that mimic the feeling of mythology and folklore. I also looked at structural harshness, color variation, and reading about gesture in relation to feminine and masculine identity. Coming back to uni after lockdown made me eager to experiment with scale, and that's when I produced this drawing. Working the scale made me think about how murals are a slightly more immersive and interactive way to view a drawing. I also wanted to include some commission work which utilised the style I established in fourth year, but involved making visual interpretations of descriptions of monsters and characters based in the Cthulhu mythos. Hopefully in the next few days I'm going to receive the gaming manual that these illustrations are a part of. At this point I decided to defer, and the rest of the PowerPoint refers to the work I have made since returning. I broke it down into three main categories of experimentation for semester one so far. At the start of the year, I got an iPad, and I've been using this to make more refined pieces out of old work. I also used this software to make a short stop motion animation out of this piece developed from my large scale work, but I was having trouble exporting it to this PowerPoint. Some of these controlled drawings have personal symbolism in them, but because of the universal nature, I don't like to dictate how someone else wants to read the work, unless they specifically want to know my interpretation or intention. And I don't have an answer for everything. Some examples of common motifs I'm interested in right now are these dogs with prosthetic limbs, masks and masking, smoking babies, and robed people. I wanted to give an example of a piece I've done with slightly more intentional or explicit meaning. This piece was inspired by Ophelia, which was a painting inspired by Shakespeare's Hamlet. And I was interested in this because there is no onstage death of Ophelia, only a highly detailed account of her death by Queen Gertrude. This is an incredibly famous and poetic description of falling and slowly drowning, but it also acts as a sort of plot hole as to how someone can watch a death in such close detail without intervening in some shape or form. There has been speculation around the symbolism of this choice, but in this context it felt like a good metaphor for climate crisis, recasting Ophelia as a Mother Earth and the spectator as the watcher. The laws around protesting at the time were also changing, and this inspired the rally over the river. Moving away from narrative and control into my more abstract work, these are some digital pieces. I'm definitely interested in working back into designs to abstract them, or the opposite way around, working from chaos to detail and more refinement and structure. I'm also interested in writing words and then detailing them to the point of like having no clarity and being like unable to read. This large-scale piece was a experiment with gesture and building back into that gesture to create more fluid lines and movement. But I also really like finding faces and structures within the overall piece, which I think some people pick up on more than others. More abstraction. This is a large-scale piece that sort of combines a lot of the different forces I was working with, such as the abstract and then the narrative aesthetic, some character motifs, and some gesture work that I took from the large-scale image I showed before. And here I'm sort of making these abstract paintings, and then I'm layering over them with a projector to get the narratives and the illustrative themes onto the abstract. It's sort of a work in progress, trying to find ways of layering these. And I didn't have a lot of time with the projector that I need to book out again. This is where I am now, working similarly to how I did with the projector, only this is all digital. Obviously I'm taking photographs of analog abstract work and then layering my drawings onto them digitally and working back in to add more color and pattern and sort of build up in areas that are over detailed or like, you know, remove. This is obviously a really chaotic way to work, and I think it needs refinement, but I'm excited to see some color coming back into these drawings after so long of working mainly with just black and white ink. Okay, well that's everything. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it.